historically, so our organisation is 200 years old. Historically, our organisation right at the top has been pale, male, and middle-aged, essentially. Now, for the first time, there is a minority ethnic woman right at the top of the top four, and that's me. So I'm the first one to be a minority ethnic woman in that role. I'm the first person to be minority ethnic, full stop. I'm the first person to be a junior doctor in that role. I was the first person to be pregnant in that role, first person to be on maternity leave in that role, and actually I'm also the first person to be Muslim in that role. So it's taken 200 years, but I'm here to tell you that the BMA has changed. Now at the top four, there are 2 women. My colleague Emma is also a junior doctor, and she's also the first openly out member of the Chief Officer team. So we have a more diverse Chief Officer team at the BMA than we've ever had before. And we're reaching out to stakeholders like yourself to say, come and join us. Tell us what we can do to be more inclusive and more representative, and we will absolutely meet you there. As I've already mentioned, I'm a junior doctor in the northwest of England, and I'm passionate about representing those groups that are minoritised. So we're not minority groups, we're minoritised. And often, particularly in this room, if you look within the NHS, we're quite a big majority of the makeup of the workforce. And it's all about increasing our collective member voice. So we can all have smaller voices individually, and you can meet in groups like this room here with the Student Doctors Union. Or you can all meet together in one big collective voice, and we can really become quite powerful and quite loud. And that's what I'm hopeful you'll start to appreciate, is what the BMA can do for you. So I'm going to talk to you about the BMA and what our vision is. I'm going to talk to you about our current journey on industrial action and full pay restoration, and how we're interacting with the current UK government. And I'm also going to talk about how we can support you, how your trade union, your representative, whether you're a member or not, is able to support you, and particularly how we can support minoritised groups. Sorry, this screen's doing weird things. And why it is that we're so keen to have a more inclusive and representative organisation, why it's important for us and why it's important for you. I'm going to start by telling people in this room nothing that should surprise you, just how big the backlog is. So we know at the moment, in NHS England alone, 7.1 million people are waiting for an outpatient appointment in secondary care, 7.1 million. But we actually know the hidden backlog is probably double that, or close to double that, at 13 million. We also know that more than 2 million people are waiting more than 18 weeks. These figures, once upon a time, would have been staggering. Now they almost seem to be every day. And over 400,000, so close to 500,000, are waiting over a year. Now days, months, years can make a massive difference in a patient's journey and their prognosis. The government have had a number of recovery plans. We know from our surveys that only 1% of our respondents have any faith in them. GP appointments are an all-time high. Despite what the Daily Mail and other right-wing press will say, actually GPs are seeing more patients than they've ever seen before. In October 2022, so just October gone, they had 32 million appointments. 32 million, that's half the population of a GP appointment. But apparently they're still underperforming and not seeing enough patients. Clinical burden, so all of that waiting and that backlog is huge, and it impacts every single fraction of the NHS. Now, why is it that we have such a big backlog? Lots of people seem to think it's the pandemic, but actually, these numbers were here way before the pandemic. The bread and butter of the NHS is poor. We have less doctors per 1,000 inhabitants than most OECD EU countries. So those at the top have a ratio of five doctors to every 1,000 inhabitants. The UK has just 2.9. The average is 3.7. We've calculated, just to get to that average, you need 46,300 more doctors. 46,300. So already our current system is 46,000 doctors short. And we've got all the backlog we're dealing with. So I talked about the bread and butter, that's the workforce. Beds. So the average number of beds per 1,000 people in most OECD EU countries is 4.6. Germany has 7.9. We have 2.4. You're looking at a third less beds. So if you look at why our response to the pandemic is poorer, why our response to the backlog is poorer, we literally don't have enough beds. And then you think about that backlog and what our patients are waiting for, and they're waiting for investigations. We have less scanners, CT scanners and MRI scanners, and I won't read out the numbers, you can see yourself, but we're literally the third lowest. If you put all the OECD nations together, right at the top, the likes of Germany, right at the bottom is us. And I think one of the countries poorer than us is in terms of CT scanners and MRI scanners, Poland. So the very bread and butter that make up the NHS, the workforce, the beds, the diagnostic equipment that we need, it just isn't there. Workforce trends. So despite the government committing to 6,000 extra doctors, extra GPs in the next 12 months, that was a commitment they made almost a decade ago, we actually have 2,000 less GPs than we're supposed to get. So we're actually 8,000 short on their target. As of September 2022, NHS England has 133,000 vacancies. So 1 in 10 posts are unfilled in the NHS. 47,000 of those are nursing vacancies, and you know our nursing colleagues are now striking, but actually 9,000 of those, just less than 10,000, are medical vacancies. So you're already, when you go to work on a daily basis in the NHS, you're going down with a workforce 9,000 less than what it should be. But we know 15% of all GMC registrants that are now coming in to join the NHS and the health workforce in the UK are actually international medical graduates. So yeah, we have about 7,700 UK graduates, but doubling that number are international medical graduates. And you really are, and I know many of those people are in this room, you really are the bread and butter of the NHS and the backbone, and without you, we'd be in a much worse place. So not only have we not got enough doctors, but we're actually hemorrhaging doctors on the other side. And retention is a major problem. More than half the consultants we've surveyed want to work less. Almost half of GPs that we've surveyed want to leave the NHS and want to leave general practice altogether. And 43% want to retire earlier. So we've got a problem now where we just don't have enough doctors, full stop. We've not invested enough doctors, and more doctors are leaving the system than have ever left before. It's all sounding quite bleak, sorry. It does get better towards the end. So what does the BMA want to do? Well, we know our wider aim is for society and for NHS. Then we absolutely need to think about our members, and we really need to look after our medical students and doctors, because you are what's keeping the UK healthy. We know we can't do it alone, so you can all have your different fights in your own different corners, or we can unionise. That's what the BMA does. Whether you're a BMA member or not, we are your trade union. So when you go into practice and you sign a contract, the contract has been negotiated by the BMA if it's following the national guidance. Your pension, negotiated in part by the BMA. Everything that you do day in, day out, the BMA has a stake in. And really, you can have those decisions made by you, or you can get involved and you can have a say about the decisions that affect you. And that's what I'm really asking for you to do today. We've now got 176,000 members. This is more members in the BMA than we've ever had before, and we're actually now seeing more international medical graduates joining the BMA than we've ever seen before. So we're doing something right. And like I say, we really need you, because we can't represent you if you're not on our committees and if you're not our members. Why are we where we are? So in July just gone, 2022, the UK government offered a 4.5% pay award, but it excluded junior doctors. So junior doctors were fixed on the 2% that they were offered several years ago. We know inflation is at 10.7%. So this is a below inflation pay rise that doesn't include junior doctors. In ARM 2022, we passed policy to ensure that we reach full pay restoration. So our pay has been going down year on year since 2008, and what we're now aiming for is full pay restoration, which is in a margin of about 26%. Junior doctors, when they start at Foundation Year 1, are on £14 per hour. We don't think that meets what that's fair pay. We don't think That's what the health of the nation is worth, £14 per hour. So at the moment, you may know, if you don't know, junior doctors across the UK are being balloted for industrial action. I know if there are junior doctors in this room, or if you work with junior doctors and they're of international medical graduate background, they might be more concerned about the protections that they offer, especially if they're visa dependent. We've got those protections, but being a BMA member makes sure that you have that further protection being part of the trade union. If anybody does have concerns, if you've got juniors that work with you that have those concerns, I do ask them to get in touch. There's loads of FAQs as well on our website. So why is it important that we represent you and we represent minoritized groups? I've already mentioned that the most important tool the BMA has is our membership. In any room, when we sit down and we say we represent 176,000 members, that's incredibly powerful. But actually, it works both ways. As a trade union and a professional association, we offer a lot of support and a lot of services, whether it's exams, whether it's contact checking, whether it's pay slips checking, whether it's pension advice, whether it's financial advice. Whether you have any problems with your employers, we do all of that support for you. But actually what we get back from you, and that's your voice and your input in the policies we make, is incredibly important. So if you have an issue locally, did you know that you can get involved? You can get involved with your local negotiations committee or local branch of practices, and that can filter all the way up to the conferences that I chair, and that can form policy within the organisation. So for instance, at the end of this, when there's time for a couple of questions, if you wanted to quiz me on specific issues you're having, that's something the BMA can and should be helping you with. So if you're a BMA and you're not a BMA member and you're not making use of your membership, I urge you to. And if you're not a BMA member and you're thinking, why BMA, how's it going to help me? Then I urge you to look on the website and see what services you could be benefiting from. I think I've kind of said this already, but part of my role in the BMA is as equality lead. Now we know that the discrimination doctors face and medical students face is mirrored in our population, and the COVID pandemic was a brilliant example of that. So 90% of the doctors that died, 90% of the healthcare staff that died during the pandemic were of an ethnic minority background. And we saw similar in terms of objective ratios in the public. So we knew that our ethnic minority patients fared worse when it came to vaccine uptake, when it came to treatment, when it came to access to services. And it goes the same in every sort of every level of discrimination, whether it's sexism, whether it's racism, whether it's homophobia. We know what doctors experience is the same as what patients experience, and that's why it's so incredibly important that we look after our doctors and we look after our medical students. It's a wider aim is to look after society and NHS. This is my role. So I chair the annual representative meeting, and each year 600 people get together in summer. This year it's on the 3rd of July, and we make policy. You can all apply if you're a BMA member to be part of that policy forming group. We debate motions, and then that becomes policy for the BMA and becomes something that we act on. So for instance, last year the ARM passed policy on full pay restoration. That is now the BMA's remit. That's what the BMA is going to do. It's going to get full pay restoration for every doctor around the UK, from junior doctors all the way up to consultants, staff grades in between, and general practice. So we're going to aim for full pay restoration over the next 5 years. It would be really interesting at the end of this, I think, Q&As, if you could tell me things that are affecting you, and I can give you advice on how we can support you with that. We know that ethnic minority doctors and international medical graduates are the migrant architects of the NHS. You were there at inception, you've been there throughout the journey, and you're still here. And if we were to lose our international medical graduates, not just doctors actually, across the health system, including nursing staff and allied health professionals, we'd be in a much worse place. And I think that value and realising that potential and how important it is isn't fully realised, particularly at the top of the NHS. The BMA realises that. And that's why we're doing extra work than we've ever done before, to really reach out and say, what can we do to support you better, and what can we do to encourage you to join our organisation so we can be your voice as well. We know that ethnic minority doctors and international medical graduates face more discrimination at every level. So if we talk about differential attainment, if you are a white woman taking the average general practice exam, when you go in, you have an 80% chance of passing. So white woman goes in, UK graduate, 80% chance of passing an exam. If you turn that round and you make yourself you're a black woman, junior doctor, sitting an exam, and I'm going to add an extra layer there because there is early data to show this, and you wear a scarf and you're a Muslim, those numbers are reversed. So you've now got close to 20% chance of passing. How is that a fair exam? And we see that across the board for most exams. If you are a woman, and you're an ethnic minority, you're even more disadvantaged. And that's where intersectionality comes in, and it's really important. So that's where differential attainment goes in. We know that to progress through the system, to get to a consultant level or to get to the GP level, it's harder for ethnic minority graduates. And it's harder, doubly harder if you're an international medical graduate. But I've already told you, we're relying on you within the NHS, and there's absolutely no doubt that your medical expertise is exactly the same, if not better, when you join the NHS. So why is there that gap? And of course, all of that leads to the ethnicity pay gap. So you are disenfranchised at every level within the NHS, and we really need to get to the bottom of that. But again, we can't do that without you. If we are to truly represent you, we need to know what you're thinking and how you'd like us to support you. We know ethnic minority doctors face inequalities and experiences. So these are some of the experiences. We know from our surveys that if you're an ethnic minority doctor, you're more likely to be referred to the GMC. We know that if there are local issues, they are less likely to be resolved. We know that you're more likely to be unfairly blamed. We also know that you're more likely to be criticised. So I'm also an ethnic minority doctor. You can have the same treatment from yourself and someone who's not ethnic minority, and your clinical plans and your demeanour will be picked up on more than others. We know there is systemic racism across the board, and we know it affects healthcare professionals just as much as it affects patients. We've done an incredible amount of work, and we continue to do an incredible amount of work in this space, whether it's looking into racism in medicine, whether it's calling it out. And if you haven't read any of these, or if you haven't looked into any of them, they have got summary documents attached. Racism in medicine, delivering racial equality in medicine, and why are we still here? Why are we still here? It was done by a group that included Roger Klein. And actually, what's really interesting about this paper, and I'm going to quote Roger Klein recently, he said he's sick of telling people why there's a problem, or validating the fact that there is a problem. And I think I'm also at that stage. The conversation we now need to be having is, what can be done? So what's the next stage? We know there's a problem, there's always been a problem. What can be done next to resolve this? And it'd be interesting to know your thoughts on this. Racism on a regular basis. 21% of Asians, 24% of those from dual heritage, and 21% of those from a black background, compared to those who are white British. Having your clinical ability or professionalism doubted. How many of you seen it? How many of you witnessed it? How many has it happened to? You make a plan and someone questions, why are you doing that? And how many times is it due to the fact that you might be of a black background or an Asian background? That's what our surveys are saying. Career progression, so a few more statistics about that, and you'll know black and Asian doctors and dual heritage doctors are more likely to struggle with career progression than any other background. We know that racism impacts well-being and ultimately attrition within the medical profession, anxiety, depression, stress, sleep, reduce self-confidence and self-esteem, and we lose good doctors to a system that isn't fair. Some of the good work we've already done, we know that a lot of our international medical graduates join RMO as RMOs on specific non-negotiated contracts. We've done a lot of work this year, particularly on that following ARM. We know that in some cases they're paid less than £11 an hour. Some of the anecdotes we have, you're only as useful as the hours that you can get out for £11.99. These working conditions can be likened to slavery. They've removed me from my hospital on a false accusation when I raised serious concerns. I was bullied and verbally assaulted with racist slurs. Since then, we've written to every NHS trust and private provider demanding that they have minimum employment standards and align to our negotiated NHS terms and conditions. We've got a lot of resources to help anybody on RMO, so if you know any of your colleagues, any international medical graduates who are working on RMO contracts, please tell them to get in touch with the BMA. Even if they're not members, we've still got surveys open, and we can support you to make sure you're aligned to a national contract. If you're not on a national contract, you really should be. So I hope I've made it clear that it is an absolute priority that the BMA does support international medical graduates. You are incredibly important to us, not just for the BMA as a trade union, but actually for the wider society and NHS and everything we're trying to achieve. Something that we've launched to hopefully help our international medical graduates when they come to the UK, and even before, is our international affiliate membership. This is new, so it's a reduced price, so anybody who's thinking of coming to the UK to work, so those 7,700 doctors who join the GMC register each year, you can join as an affiliate membership. So a reduced rate, with reduced services, but still access to lots of support and help with the BMA. We can give you guidance and support. You've got access to BMA and BMJ careers. It's a gateway to membership, a full BMA membership when you do join the NHS and do come to the UK. And of course, you've got access to our extensive digital library and the BMJ. And you can link into wider BMA work. But to truly eradicate racism within the NHS and support our doctors fully, we need accountability at all levels. It's not just good enough to say, oh, we've got anti-racism policy. You've actually got to be proactive about it. You've got to call it out at every level, particularly at management. And that is what we're trying to achieve, and that's what we're calling for organisations to do. The ethnicity pay gap. So when I talked about it being harder for those of ethnic minorities to reach the full height of their medical potential, if you call it, their clinical potential, that's leading to an ethnicity pay gap. And it really, for it to have a fairer system, we need to eradicate that. We're calling for systematic monitoring and sharing and learning of best practice, and that's where our members come in as well. So we really need to know what's happening on the ground. We need evidence, we need anecdotes, we need you to speak to us. We want to hear about your challenges, we want to represent you better, we want to make sure you have access to BMA services, whether it's pensions and financial guidance or key contract checking, legal advice, etc. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you, Dr. Patel, for this excellent talk. I really liked the term minoritized, because I think when you say minority, there's generally an acceptance, and then people do content with it. But when you say minoritized, that, you know, the name itself, it tells you that this is an action has been taken against you, so there should be a reaction. Before I open the floor for questions, I have just a quick question about the GMC. You've touched briefly on that. We know that through the different statistics that minority doctor gets more referred and more aggressive actions and stuff like that. With the high-profile two cases of the pediatric Dr. Khadija Osman's in it, I think the GMC has come under heat, and because of that, correct me if I'm wrong, they're not going to refer any doctors after the panel to the court. Is that right? And are there any more actions or more heat that we can put the GMC under? Because the GMC should be a body for the doctors to protect them rather than persecute them. So I would love to hear your take on that.
Can I add just one point for this question? The last report from GMC states that comparing against doctor, there is no difference between white and black or ethnic minority. So the black doctors in the public, they believe that they are as competent as white. So there is no difference in the percentage. But the referral from the employer is double, 0.6% from black doctor and 0.28 from white. So why the employer thinks that the white doctor is more competent than the black doctor or the Asian doctor? Any intervention from BLA to tackle that with the employer?
Yeah, so I can answer a couple of those questions, and I do have some expertise. So I worked with the GMC for 12 months. I was their first junior doctor to work on the fitness to practice directorate, and I did actually go through cases myself as a medical case examiner. So it was Dr. Hadiza Bawagaba, who was a paediatrician, who is now a consultant, and the case there, so that the problem, they haven't said they can't refer anything to the courts because there's a legal system, so the legal system runs in parallel to fitness to practice. What they said is they wouldn't appeal an MPTS hearing or an MPTS result. The GMC has many issues, like all organisations, but when it comes to racism, and when it comes to the discrimination that ethnic minority doctors face, it's multi-systemic. Minority doctors face discrimination at every single level. So I've already talked about bullying, I've talked about harassment, I've talked about the ethnicity pay gap, I've talked about you're more likely to be confronted, about your clinical management, on the basis that you're an ethnic minority. We already know that. We already also know that there is institutional racism, structural racism throughout the NHS and throughout society, actually. So the stakes are against you. And then we know that if something does go wrong locally, you are more likely to be referred to the GMC. So the GMC has ELAs, employment liaison advisors, that go to hospitals, that talk to medical directors, that talk to responsible officers, and talk through any cases that they may be struggling with and concerns they have. We know at that stage, if you're an ethnic minority doctor, you're more likely to go that step further, have that step further taken to you, where you're referred into the GMC. And if you haven't, Fair to Refer is a report that came out in 2019. Again, it was Roger Klein and Dr. Walligan, I've forgotten her first name, who wrote that report and talked about all the discrepancies within the GMC and what recommendations they would make to iron those out. So actually it's not just within the GMC, it's before you even get referred to the GMC. The discrimination starts at DOT. If I give you some statistics, so roughly each year you want to guess how many doctors there are on the register. So I've told you numbers within the BMA, but do you know how many doctors are registered with the GMC at the moment? How many doctors do we have? Have a guess. Just throw out some numbers at me.
15,000.
Way more. So how many?
250,000.
More than 250,000.
700,000?
Less than that. so in the region of 320,000. How many GMC referrals are made each year? So how many complaints are made each year? If I tell the 320,000 doctors, how many complaints are made?
10,000.
Between 8 and 10,000 every year. How many of those are complaints that need action? So how many do you think are close? So just like when you go into A&E, you go to see triage, and you'll be told, okay, you do need to see a doctor, this is an A&E problem. If we were to take out all the A&E problem, non-A&E problem, similar to that, fitness to practice, if they say, we're going to close some cases because these are not true concerns, how many cases do you think are closed?
5,000.
80%.
80%. So it's more than that. It's actually 85%. 85% of concerns are not true concerns. They're either vexatious or they have no basis. And the book is closed straight away. And actually doctors don't get told about them. Which is right, because if you got told every time somebody made a vexatious or a non-complaint against you, it'd be daunting, wouldn't it? Yeah. And you can guess who gets the most complaints about them, right? Yeah. We're in this room, aren't we? Yeah. So already the system's against you. But actually, through progress, through the fitness to practice progress, do you want to guess how many are suspended? How many are suspended at the end of the year? So we've gone down from 320,000, 8,000 complaints made, 85% closed straight away, 15% investigated further. How many people are actually suspended?
Less than 5%.
I don't know the number, but
Way less. You're looking at double figures. So you're looking at the
I don't know the number, but one doctor is too many.
But the people that are suspended, what do you think they're suspended for? What do you think they're excluded for? What are the main things that doctors are actually excluded for or taken off the register?
Failure to provide.
Negligence?
It's not clinical negligence actually.
Raising concerns.
It's other stuff. It's more criminal stuff.
Oh.
So your clinical expertise isn't what gets you taken off the register. And you'll have read the cases in the newspapers, the doctors that have done something criminally wrong, and really those people that you don't want to be treating you. The problem when it comes to ethnic minority doctors is that at every level, they're referred more, they're investigated more. And the vast majority of those come out of the system having not done anything wrong and nothing found against them. Now, that system, the GMC would argue, needs solving at ground level. They need less doctors referred into the system. What I'm telling you here is my genuine advice, the most important advice. If you do get referred, make sure before you get referred that you're a member of a trade union, and more than that, that you have indemnity. So join a medical defence organisation, make sure you have indemnity. We know that our international medical graduates are less likely to do that because it's £400 a year that you don't necessarily see a benefit of unless you end up in front of the GMC. And if you end up in front of the GMC, don't keep it inside, talk to people about it. So it's not on my slides, and it should have been on my slides, but we have a wellbeing service. It's entirely free, whether you're a GMC member or not. And it's also entirely free for any doctor or medical student in the UK and their dependents. So if you are the partner or a child of a medical student or doctor, and they're not a member of the BMA, it doesn't matter. We've got a wellbeing service for you because we recognise just how stressed and burnt out the NHS is and just the impact on family members and doctors and medical students themselves. If you get referred, talk to someone. Make sure you have the protection before, and make sure you get the right advice and the people around you, because we know that at every level you're more likely to be discriminated against. So we can't, as the BMA, stop you getting referred at the moment, but if anything happens, you are not alone. That wider picture of what we do about accountability, we're constantly having conversations with the GMC, constantly holding them to account. I sit on both their EDI advisory forum, I have regular meetings with the GMC, I also sit on their BME forum, and we do call them out. And you know, you'll see their recent report on Dr. Aurora's case, where they made themselves recommendations on what they should be doing to create a fairer GMC. And you've Fair to Refer report, which I also encourage you to read. That came out in 2019. Again, have recommendations on how they can get better. I think reform of the GMC is going to take a long time, but what I have seen in it is they do talk about there being a commitment. The most important thing is that we continue to call it out. And the BMA is doing that on your behalf. But we still need international medical graduates to join the BMA to tell us what we need to do for you. Otherwise, we're talking on behalf of you without your voice. Does that make sense? So in order for us to solve problems that are happening to you, you need to tell us. And only then can we represent you. Otherwise, we're doing what we think is best for you. I hope that goes some way to answer your question. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Any questions?
My question is, international medical graduates, once they join the GMC, there isn't a pathway, like a clear pathway to integrate them into the system. They go into a lot of stress. But what can we do for the employers? Like for example, I have junior doctors who say that it was my first week, I had 1 week of induction, and I was doing night shifts. How do we integrate them into the system without putting them into all of the stress?
I think that's a really excellent question. Ideally, wouldn't it be brilliant if every IMG had a shadow and they could just do that until they felt safer in the system? So there are a couple of things that I would recommend. The GMC has a three-day free training called Welcome to the UK. Every international medical graduate should do that. It's entirely free. And it's Welcome to the UK practice, and they talk you through different things, different challenges you will have. I would also say, join the BMA, the affiliate program. So it's a reduced rate, but anyone can join that with the intention to come to the UK. So if you've got colleagues who want to make that step, so I've told you, more than 7,000 international medical graduates join each year. If you've got colleagues elsewhere in Sudan possibly who want to make that leap over to the NHS, get them to join the affiliate program. Get them to start reading the material, that'll all be accessible. Get them to start talking to the BMA, whether it's training we can give, whether it's induction to the NHS we can give, whether it's talking about the issues like the backlog and how they can be supported to tackle it. Once you get to the UK, if you've already got that background information, then maybe that can help you at that stage. But the other thing I would say is, if they're not sure, they need to raise a concern. And I think that's where the problem is. Because I've told you that international medical graduates, ethnic minority doctors, are the least likely to raise concern. So you come here, you get thrown straight into a night shift. You know you're not safe, but you can't raise concerns because you're scared. You're worried, you're concerned. That's why the BMA comes in. And that's where that protection is. Middle of the night, we've also got email services, chat services. You can drop us a message and you can say, I'm in this situation and I don't know what to do. And that's it, you're done. So you've raised the concern and then the BMA can take over. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to make it easier for you. The wider problem for all international medical graduates and how they integrate to the NHS, I think is a much bigger question and much harder to tackle. I know there are some areas, so I'm from, my parents are from Blackburn. East Lancashire is quite good at recruiting international medical graduates, and they have a whole programme around them to integrate them into the area. But I know not every trust is able to do that. I also know that trusts actively recruit in South Asia, actively recruit in Africa, and get people to come in. Some trusts do it better than others. But it all comes back to, when there's a problem, how do you raise concern? You are least likely to do it yourself, so do it through a trade union. The other nugget I'd say is that between July and October, BMA membership is entirely free. So what I would say to you is join in July and get your benefits till October. And if we do a good job, stay. And if we don't, no, honestly, if we don't, you leave. So join in July and raise all of your concerns and get your voice heard, because we know there's a problem. International medical graduates don't trust the BMA or don't want to join the BMA or don't see the benefit, and sometimes it just comes down to finance. You've got your GMC fees. I've just told you have to join indemnity. You've got your Royal College fees, you've then got your BMA fees, and then of course you've got your mortgage, your car, your kids, everything that goes around you. So there's only a finite resource. Join the BMA in July. If we don't give you a good service, leave in October. That's the deal. And if you've got a good service, stay.
Yeah, I must say, I think most of my colleagues, senior doctors and stuff like that, were both members of the BMA and indemnity scheme, but I think it's a problem obviously with junior doctors and particularly for IMJ who are just starting their journey in the UK. Just to go back to Sarah's point that she has made, and you've given a very good answer to, in terms of the current issue with the strike, I know for a fact that a number of doctors have been suddenly threatened, shall I say, about getting their visa extended if they do join the BMA. And I know that the BMA has sent a response, and they have also asked doctors to join the BMA and to let the BMA know about these hospitals. So now these new IMJ doctors are even afraid and concerned just to let the BMA know what happens in this hospital. So my question is, do you have people on the ground that can proactively let you know, do whatever steps that needs to be taken? Because as you said, and as you have clearly shown over here, that minority doctors, they can sometimes be scared to raise their alarm, particularly if they're just starting in the UK.
Absolutely. So, I had a slide up there with a big fish saying, don't panic, unionise. Now, we know that the country's in a bit of a bother at the moment. 500,000 people went on strike last week. 500,000. 500,000 people can't be wrong. So the government strategy is always going to be the same, and manager strategy is always going to be the same, to scare doctors. If we don't strike, if we remain scared, we won't fight for fairer pay. But I told you that the longer term is the fact that we have 1 in 10 positions in the NHS is an unfilled vacancy, and that can't go on. And I've told you there's a backlog of 13 million that we don't recognise. So we have to do something. So, you know, if you're not doing it for full pay restoration, you're not doing it for yourself, you're doing it for the bigger picture, the answer always comes back to the same: join the BMA. And it's good to know that more senior doctors are part of the BMA, but we need BMA members right on the ground. We have LNCs in every trust in the UK, and as well as that, we have local regional committees, so whether it's a regional junior doctors committee, a regional consultants committee, regional staff and associate specialist committee, or regional general practice committee. We have those across the UK. As well as that, if you wanted to and you were a BMA member and you raise a concern, but you wanted to do it confidentially, you could do that as well. But you have to be a BMA member. You have to, there's also monthly subscription if you didn't want to commit to the whole year. You have to join and at some stage raise your concern. I know it's a terrifying step, but you can say to the BMA, I want this kept confidential, but I'm saying to you that there's a concern with this hospital. At least then we know. If you don't tell us and if you don't talk to us, you can't assume that someone else will. Yeah? And that's again, that comes to the crux of it. That's the really important bit. But I also know from the stats that we are the least likely group to raise our concerns. So I appreciate it. It's really difficult. It's quite easy of me to say, just talk to the BMA. But that is the easiest step. And all of you all look fairly senior in this room, not making a judgment. But it's our role and your roles to go and tell your juniors that you've got their back. It makes a massive difference to tell a junior, I've got your back, I've seen what's happened, it's not right. You raise a concern, you go to the BMA, you'll make a massive difference to somebody.
Dr. Patel, thank you for the talk. I think it applies to many people's lives and work. My question is, we know that some high-profile cases of ethnic minorities have been raised, and actually the media has been the major problem in destroying that doctor's career. We know, starting from a pediatrician, Sabah Al-Zayat, about baby Peter. We know there is one half Sudanese doctor who is Dr. Omar, I don't know whether you know him or not, at Omar Karim.
Yep.
We know so many cases, but they have been destroyed by the media, and the media can destroy anyone's life, any families. And what is the role? Because I don't know whether the BMA has got any power in reaching all this big media outlet to actually reverse, you know, the impact of what they're saying. Do you have all these media outlets? Because nobody remembers now that Hadiza has been actually restored and she's a consultant now, that Mr. Omar Karim has actually won his case. Sabah Al-Zayat, unfortunately, I think she's left the country or something like that. She was destroyed for good, and she didn't face the GMC on grounds of, I think, mental health problems. So how can you do that? I want a powerful voice from the BMA. I want them to be there, and then everyone else, because the public is very important in that situation. We know that Hadiza Barghab, everything on the news about her, when she was going to the court, coming back from the court with the child who unfortunately left his life, parents, cracking champagne at his grave, all these things, you're not attracting the public. We need a strong media to attract the public and be on the doctor's side as well. So how can you help in that?
It's really interesting what you say. So I think a couple of statistics for you, although I can't remember the perfect numbers off the top of my head. But if you look at the BMA in terms of media output, and you compare us to all the Royal Colleges, we are right at the top. We are genuinely right at the top. We have more media output than any other organisation that speaks for doctors. Unfortunately, the media will only report what they want and what their viewers want to hear. And you know, I will say this. Ethnic minority doctors on the front page sells, and unfortunately the public can be against us, and the public can be against, and that's why we're discriminated against. But in those cases, what can the BMA actually do that will make a massive difference? So in Hadiza Barghab case, we didn't get involved till quite a late stage. But Kareem is actually part of BMA Council. And Kareem's most recent case has been supported and funded by the BMA. So if you're a BMA member and you have a case, you can ask the BMA to support you. And the BMA will support you. Yeah? So in terms of what we can do, we can give the media what we think is right and what we know is right, but it's up to them whether they pick it up. And you know, there are some media outlets that want to hear the truth, and there are some that prefer not to because that's what sells. So like I said, we have more media output than any other organisation, anyone else representing doctors, anyone else speaking for patients, because we're also a professional association as well as a trade union. But at the end of the day, we can't make everyone tell the truth.
But can you support a doctor to hold them to account?
Yes, we absolutely can.
You can take them to court, for example, and win the case. Would the BMA be supporting that
cases
doctor?
against media and press, less so, but cases against the GMC and Kareem's most recent case, we are supporting that. So we are actually funding that. And I think that would be the bigger one, to clear a doctor's name. If we took the press to court every time they said something we didn't like, we'd never come out. We'd have no money there. We can't influence the press as much as we want to do, but if we make the NHS fairer and we keep calling it out and we support doctors when they get into difficulty, we'll have a bigger output at the end of the day. Not necessarily what you wanted to hear, I appreciate that, but we are working incredibly hard. The other thing that we can do for all doctors is representations. I've just told you I'm the first ethnic minority woman in my position in 200 years. We need more people like me to get involved with the BMA, stand for committees, get in those places, raise your profiles, get elected. If more of the BMA looks like the people in this room, it will change things. If you can get into committees within the BMA, you can get into committees within the NHS. If management and high-level organisations are more reflective of the people that work below them, we'll have a more representative NHS, won't we? Again, that's my challenge to you. Yeah, thank you.
Right, before we conclude, would it be possible to put the BMA link and fees? Did I see it earlier on? I must say that I'm a member of the BMA, and I had an industrial issue with the hospital that I wasn't really willing to back down, and the BMA has supported me. And I would be the member of the BMA for many years to come. So I would. I know that this recorded session would be seen by the wider doctors in the UK, and most of them would be junior doctors, so I would encourage all our junior doctors to join the BMA. I have no conflict of interest at all. I am just a member who was very happy with their service. Do you have the link for? I thought I see it. No, that's okay. You didn't have it, yeah. Perfect. Yeah. Thank you very much, and thank you very much, Dr. Patel, for this excellent talk. And we would no doubt have you again in our meeting. Thank you very much.